My daughter stayed silent for 20 years, until I won $10 million. Then, suddenly, she reached out with an invitation to her birthday party, hoping for generosity from the father she had cast aside. But what she didn't know was that I had my own plan, one that would turn her celebration into a nightmare. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. The sharp, urgent ring of the phone tore through the evening quiet, as jarring as a blade slicing silk. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, watching the gravy on my meatloaf stiffen as the sound echoed around my small kitchen. The television muttered on about yet another factory closing downtown, but the ringing drowned everything else out. It had been 24 hours since my television interview aired. 24 hours since I told the local news I'd won $10 million in the state lottery. When the reporter asked about family, I said only that I was alone. That my wife, Anne, had passed away 15 years earlier. What I didn't say was that I had a daughter, one who had walked away from me 2 decades ago. My hand shook as I reached for the receiver. The number on the caller ID meant nothing, but something in my chest tightened with an emotion I couldn't name. Hello? My voice came out rougher than I meant. There was a pause. Then a voice, smooth as silk, but with an edge of danger. Hi, Daddy. It's me, Lori. The fork slipped from my hand, clattering onto the plate. 20 years of silence shattered with just 4 words. Her voice still had the same musical lilt I remembered from when she was little. But underneath, I could hear it, something staged, deliberate. Lori. Her name escaped in barely more than a whisper. I know it's been a long time. Another pause, perfectly placed, like a line she'd rehearsed. I saw you on the news yesterday. Congratulations on your win. And there it was, the real reason she was back. I gripped the receiver tighter, knuckles white. My legs gave out, and I sank into the kitchen chair, staring blankly at the rain sliding down the window. 20 years. I muttered, the words flat, empty. I've wanted to call for so long, she said. But I was scared. Ashamed, maybe. But seeing you on TV, hearing that you're doing well. Her voice caught, just a hint, a perfect little tremor of vulnerability. It made me realize how much I've missed you. My free hand clutched the edge of the table like a lifeline. The coffee in my mug had long gone cold. Outside, the March evening deepened into darkness, echoing the storm building inside me. I want to invite you to my 40th birthday party, she continued when I stayed quiet. It's on April 7th. I'd love to see you, Daddy. To try to make things right. 40 years old. My little girl, 40. And I'd missed half her life, swallowed up by pride, anger, and pain. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked on mercilessly as I tried to process what was happening, this moment I'd dreamed about, dreaded, and mourned for 2 decades. Your birthday? I finally managed, my voice thick with confusion, and maybe a flicker of hope I didn't dare trust. Yes. I live in Manhattan now. I'll text you the address. Please say you'll come. That last please sounded real. Maybe it was. But 20 years of abandonment had taught me not to trust too quickly, not even my own longing. Still, she was my daughter. My only child. The baby Anne and I had rocked to sleep. The little girl who once called me her hero. The teenager so full of promise. I'll be there, I heard myself say, shocking both of us. Really? Oh, Daddy, that's wonderful. I can't wait. We have so much to catch up on. When she hung up, I sat frozen in the kitchen, still clutching the receiver. On the notepad beside me, I scrawled her Manhattan address in a shaky hand. Just 47 characters on paper, yet they felt like coordinates to another world. The news had moved on to the weather, promising warmer days ahead. But all I heard was the pounding of my own heart, and the whispers of old wounds opening again. I rose slowly, my joints aching, and carried the slip of paper upstairs like it was burning in my hand. In bed, I lay staring at the ceiling, the shadows of streetlights drifting across the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't see a 40-year-old woman. I saw the furious 20-year-old girl who had slammed the door and vanished from my life. At midnight I gave up on sleep. The floorboards groaned as I stepped into the living room. In the corner sat boxes of photographs, pieces of a life I hadn't touched in years. Tonight I opened them. Tonight I let the memories hurt. The very first photo stopped me cold. Lori at her college graduation, glowing in her cap and gown, standing between Anne and me. We had been so proud that day. Our daughter. The first in both families to earn a degree, ready to take on the world with her business dreams. That was 3 months before and past. 3 months before everything came undone. The memory struck me like a punch to the chest, dragging me back to that awful day in 2005. The funeral had been small, modest. We couldn't afford more. I was drowning in medical debt from Anne's cancer treatments, working double shifts at the factory just to keep the lights on. Lori had come back from New York for the service, wrapped in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than I earned in a month. The next morning, suitcase already packed and standing in this same living room, she looked me in the eye and asked, "Where's the money Mom left me?" My hands trembled as I picked up the photo in front of me. That moment still lives inside me with brutal clarity, every cruel word etched into my soul. "There isn't any money, honey," I had said. "The medical bills took everything." More than everything. Her face twisted with contempt, disappointment curdling into rage. "You're pathetic. A factory worker who couldn't even save his wife. Your mother loved you." I begged, desperate to reach the daughter I thought I knew. This isn't what she'd want. But Lori was already gone in spirit. Her eyes swept over the worn furniture, the patched wallpaper, the proof of a life lived paycheck to paycheck, and she judged it all as worthless. "I don't need a broke father like you," she said, cold and casual, the cruelty of use sharpening every syllable. "I'll make my own fortune. I'll have the life you never could." "Lori, please." The word had come out cracked, pitiful. She paused at the door, hand on the knob, and delivered the killing blow without even turning her head. "Don't call me. Don't write. I'm done with this life." The door slammed. And I hadn't heard her voice again, not until tonight. By 2 a.m. I sat surrounded by photographs scattered across the coffee table, fragments of a family I'd once had. Lori as a baby taking her first steps in this room. Birthday parties with lopsided cakes. Christmas mornings with more love than money. The house creaked around me, sighing like it always did. Through the thin walls I heard Mrs. Patterson's TV next door, some late-night movie filling her own solitude. The radiator banged to life, fighting the March chill leaking through the old windows. I picked up another photo. Lori at 16, rolling her eyes at some dad joke of mine, but smiling in spite of herself. When had that easy affection disappeared? When had my ambitious girl decided love wasn't worth anything if it came from poor hands? The streetlight outside carved everything into sharp shadows, pushing the past even farther away. My fingers brushed the edges of the photo, remembering the weight of her small hand in mine, the way she used to run to me with scraped knees, the way she once called me the strongest man alive. A car rolled by, headlights sweeping across the room before vanishing into the night. I gathered the photos into a neat pile, but left the graduation picture on top. That day we'd been so full of pride and dreams for her future. I imagined seeing her married one day, holding my grandchildren, watching her live the life she always wanted. Instead, I got 2 decades of silence, and a phone call that came only one day after my lottery numbers hit the news. Dawn crept through the kitchen window when I finally abandoned the photos, leaving them scattered like pieces of a broken puzzle. The morning light exposed the exhaustion carved into my reflection in the glass, an old man who had spent the night wrestling with ghosts. I shuffled toward the kitchen, joints stiff from both the cold and the endless hours on the floor. The coffee maker waited on the counter like it always did, ready to start another routine morning. But my thoughts churned with questions I didn't want answered. The machine gurgled, steam curling from my mug like a ghost from another life. April 1st had arrived with clear skies and the promise of spring, but winter still sat heavy in my bones. In the window, my reflection looked 10 years older overnight, unshaven, rumpled, eyes red from sleeplessness. The steam reminded me of another moment of shock, exactly a month earlier, March 1st. I had sat at this same table, lottery ticket trembling in my hands as I checked each number twice, then 3 times. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, Powerball 18. I'd stared until the numbers blurred, certain exhaustion was tricking me. At 65, hope is a dangerous thing. But the numbers didn't change. That Saturday, I drove to Chicago. The longest 3 hours of my life. My hands shook so badly I had to pull over twice. The winning ticket sat in my wallet, a secret too enormous to carry. The lottery office downtown looked plain enough, gray, official, intimidating. "Sir, congratulations. You've won $10 million. The official's words echoed in the sterile room as I gripped the arms of my chair. After taxes, $6.2 million. More money than I could make in 100 lifetimes of factory work. Life-changing money. But for what life? Are you sure? I asked, my voice cracking like a teenager's. Yes, sir. Verified 3 times. The paperwork consumed hours, bank forms, tax documents, legal signatures. My head spun. Through it all, one question hammered away at me. Who do I even tell? And was gone. The few friends I had from the factory were scattered to nursing homes and retirement communities. And Lori? Who would you like to notify first? The bank manager asked while setting up the account. No one. Not yet. This stays quiet. So I carried the secret alone. For weeks, the money sat in the bank like a sleeping giant, while I went about my routine, groceries, TV, the library. I bought a new winter coat and immediately felt guilty, though now I could have bought 1,000. Then yesterday's interview changed everything. The local news had dug through public records, found the story of the retired factory worker who won big, and wanted a human interest piece. I agreed, thinking 5 minutes of attention might be nice at my age. What will you do with the money, Mr. Green? The young reporter asked, camera crew crowding my little living room. Help some local charities, maybe. Fix up the house a bit. I'd been alone since my wife died 15 years ago, so I didn't need much. I'd mentioned it deliberately, carefully. If Lori caught the interview, she'd see her father as both wealthy and alone, a perfect target for someone who'd sever ties over money. The coffee scalded my tongue, but I barely registered it. The timing was almost too perfect to be chance. Interview aired Monday night. Daughter called Tuesday night. 20 years of silence shattered exactly 24 hours after she learned of my fortune. I set the mug down harder than necessary. The clatter sounded painfully loud in the quiet morning. Outside, my neighbor Mr. Johnson was already tending his garden, preparing for spring planting. Ordinary people doing ordinary things while I wrestled with the idea that my only child might see me as nothing more than a lottery ticket. The phone on the counter seemed to mock me with its stillness. I could call her back, test her somehow, see if her sudden warmth had roots beyond my bank account. Logic said to protect myself, to assume the worst. But she was still my daughter, the little girl who'd perched on my shoulders at the county fair, who'd glued together Father's Day cards with uneven edges. Even after 2 decades of abandonment, part of me wanted to believe she'd changed, that seeing me on television had reminded her of the father she'd once adored. The kitchen clock ticked toward 8 o'clock. Rush hour hummed through Detroit as the city woke. I walked to the window, staring down the street where I'd lived for 40 years, watching the world move forward while I remained still. My reflection looked back, an old man clutching a coffee mug, surrounded by the modest life my daughter once scorned. But now I had something she wanted. Now I had leverage. The truth settled over me slowly, like dust on a forgotten shelf. For the first time in 20 years, I held the cards in whatever game we were about to play. The question was whether I had the courage to deal them. I reached for the phone, finger hovering over the buttons. Her number was still fresh in my memory from last night's caller ID. A simple test call, just to hear her voice, to probe her intentions. Morning light streamed through the window, highlighting the determination growing in my weary eyes. Steam rose from the coffee cup, reminding me of another moment. The blinding studio lights of 2 days ago, March 30th, the day that changed everything, though I hadn't known it yet. WDIV's downtown Detroit studio felt like entering another world, chrome and glass everywhere, cables snaking across polished floors, monitors showing my nervous face from 6 angles. I'd arrived an hour early, lottery ticket clutched in a sweaty palm, wearing my best light blue shirt, the one Anne had bought me for church years ago. "Mr. Green, I'm Janet Morrison. Thank you for coming in today." Her smile was perfect, practiced. Makeup flawless under the studio glare. Behind her, a camera operator adjusted lenses, a studio assistant fidgeted with reflectors, every movement choreographed. First came makeup, humbling for a man who never worn anything more than aftershave. The young woman dabbed powder on my forehead, chatting about the weather, while I studied my reflection, wondering what Anne would think of her husband suddenly becoming a local celebrity. "Just be yourself," Janet said as we settled into the interview chairs. "Our viewers love authentic stories." Authentic? If only she knew how carefully I intended to frame mine. The red recording light blinked on, and suddenly I was performing for thousands of strangers. Janet's questions came smoothly, designed to draw maximum human interest from my unexpected fortune. $10 million, life-changing money. What are your plans? I'd practiced this answer. Help local charities. Detroit has treated me well for 40 years. Time to give back. Any family to share this incredible joy with. Here it came, the moment I dreaded and anticipated. The carefully chosen words, broadcast in hopes they'd reach the right ears in Manhattan. My wife passed away 15 years ago. I live alone now. The studio fell quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Janet's expression softened with genuine sympathy, the kind that made good television. "No children?" she asked softly. I let the pause stretch just long enough to hint at a complicated past. "That's complicated." Janet nodded, perceptive enough not to press further into private pain. She steered the conversation to safer ground. My plans for the money, advice for other lottery winners, thoughts on sudden wealth. But the seed had been planted, or perhaps the invitation extended. A wealthy widower alone in Detroit, sitting on millions with no family to protect him or share his good fortune. Exactly the type of target my daughter had always preferred. The photo shoot afterward felt surreal. I held an oversized check as cameras flashed, grinning on cue, while inside I wondered if anyone watching cared about my happiness, or only my bank account. Lottery officials posed beside me, everyone smiling like old friends rather than strangers connected by chance numbers and lucky timing. Driving home in my 15-year-old pickup, the ticket safely back in my wallet, I felt strangely hollow. Success without someone to share it with was just an expensive form of solitude. A studio assistant had handed me a business card as I left. "Mr. Green, expect some calls after this airs. People seeking money, investment opportunities, all that. Be careful who you trust." Sound advice I should have taken more seriously. Now, sitting in my kitchen 48 hours later, I realized that broadcast had been more than local news. It was a flare shot into the darkness of my daughter's ambitious life. And like a moth to the flame, she'd return the very next evening. I set down my coffee and reached for the phone, finally understanding the game ahead. My finger hovered over the last digit of her number, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window like a spotlight on this moment of reckoning. Everything hinged on the next few minutes, 20 years of unanswered questions ready to be dissected. The dial tone seemed endless before her voice came, sweet and deliberate. "Hi, Daddy. I was hoping you'd call." The performance had already begun. I grabbed a notepad and pen, ready to catalog every nuance. "Hi, Lori. We need to discuss that television interview." A barely perceptible pause. I caught it. Someone bracing for defense. "Oh, what about it, Daddy?" The endearment sounded practiced, like lines rehearsed in secret. I gripped the pen tighter, beginning my test. "There's been a mistake. The station got their facts wrong." What kind of mistake? Her tone sharpened, breaking through the sweetness. I didn't really win 10 million. Administrative error at the lottery office. They're issuing a correction today. Silence. Exactly 4 seconds. I counted them, watching the clock tick while her true nature revealed itself. Then why am I wasting my time with this conversation? There it was, the real Lori, stripped bare, no concern for my disappointment, no sympathy for public embarrassment, just cold fury at having her time wasted. Excuse me. I kept my voice steady, heart hammering. She caught herself instantly, the mask slipping back with ease. I mean, oh, Daddy, that's so disappointing. You must be devastated. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Too late. I'd heard her true voice, the one that walked out 20 years ago and never returned. Actually, Lori, I was testing you. The words dropped like stones into still water. The money is real. All of it. Another pause, filled with calculation. When she spoke again, the false warmth was cranked to maximum, overcompensating for her earlier slip. Oh, Daddy, you scared me. I'm just so happy for you. 10 million! Can you imagine? We'll have so much fun at my birthday party. I can't wait to celebrate your good fortune. As if she'd been part of my life all along, when the ticket was bought, when the numbers came up, when I sat alone in this kitchen, the moment that changed everything unshared. I scribbled notes frantically, capturing every word, wasting my time, immediately followed by, so happy for you. The transformation was complete, impressive if it weren't so heartbreaking. The party's still on April 7th? I asked, already knowing the answer. Absolutely. I've been planning something special. Just thinking about introducing you to my friends, showing off my successful father. Her voice trailed off, attempting to sound joyful, though the calculation beneath it was unmistakable. After we hung up, I stared at my notes, for a long while. The evidence was glaring, her sudden chill when the money vanished, her immediate warmth when it returned. 20 years of questioning her true feelings, now distilled into a clear, undeniable pattern. The coffee had gone cold during my experiment, but I'd barely noticed. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The father who had spent 2 decades hoping for reconciliation was gone, replaced by someone sharper, more deliberate, more strategic. I carried the notepad slowly from the kitchen to the living room, treating it like a piece of irrefutable evidence, which, in truth, it was. Evening draped over Detroit like a soft blanket, golden light spilling through the windows as I sank into Anne's favorite chair. Her photograph rested on the side table, the woman who had guided my life with unwavering moral clarity for 30 years. The hours since that morning's call had passed in a haze of routine chores. Washing dishes, folding laundry, tending the small garden Anne had planted behind the house. Yet my mind kept returning to Lori's voice, warm, cold, warm again, like a dial being twisted back and forth. "And what would you say about this?" I whispered to her picture, my fingers brushing the glass over her smiling face. She had always believed in consequences, not cruel punishment, but natural results that taught lessons. When Lori was 12 and stole candy from the corner store, and had marched her back to apologize and make amends. When she lied about grades in high school, and had taken away her driving privileges until honesty returned. Actions have consequences, she would say. Love sometimes requires tough lessons. 20 years. I had spent 2 decades rationalizing my daughter's silence, convincing myself she would call when ready, that family bonds would eventually win out over whatever drove us apart. Today's test had stripped away all illusions. There was no bond. Just a bank account. The notebook on my lap bore witness to it, her cruel words glaring back. Why am I wasting my time with this? 5 minutes into learning her father might be penniless again, and she'd already dismissed him. 5 minutes revealing what 20 years of silence truly meant. I could no longer hear Anne's voice in my head, dulled by 15 years of absence, but I could imagine what she would tell me. Love without boundaries is not love, it's enabling. A grown woman who chooses greed over family must learn the cost of that choice. Outside, life continued as usual. Mr. Johnson trimmed his hedge while grandchildren tumbled across the lawn. Mrs. Patterson walked her ancient cocker spaniel past my fence, waving when she spotted me at the window. Normal families, living normal lives, taking their connections for granted, the lives I had once dreamed of. But I had been given a different path. My only child had chosen to see me as either a resource or an inconvenience, nothing more. If she wanted to treat our relationship as a transaction, perhaps it was time to demonstrate what a real transaction looked like. I opened my notebook to a fresh page and began writing, not poetry, not sentiment, but strategy. Over the years, her rare communications had hinted at business ventures, startups, investors, projects requiring substantial capital. Now, if she had called, desperate enough to resurrect a dead relationship, something had gone awry in her golden plans. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote the first lines of what would become my daughter's lesson. Research Lori's current business situation. Find leverage. Design appropriate consequences. Not destruction, justice. A lesson in the real cost of treating family like disposable assets. 20 years of silence had taught me patience. Now it was time to teach her something in return. Outside, the streetlights flickered on as Detroit settled into another night. I rose slowly from Anne's chair, my joints complaining after a long day, and moved toward the spare bedroom where my old computer lay in hibernation. Lori wanted to play games with family loyalty and money. Fine. But after 40 years of marriage to a wise woman and 20 years of solitary reflection, I had learned a thing or two about both. The old computer groaned to life in my spare bedroom, its fan whining like a weary engine as the monitor flickered awake. April 3rd had arrived gray and biting, perfectly matching my mood as I settled into the squeaky office chair with my first cup of coffee. Sleep had evaded me once again, chased away by questions spinning endlessly about what kind of business my daughter had been running in New York. Yesterday had been spent cataloging every scrap of information I could recall, writing down every detail from our conversation. Ventures she had mentioned, investors, ambitious projects demanding serious capital and promising impressive returns. If she had reached out now, after 20 years of silence, something had gone catastrophically wrong with her golden plans. The internet crawled like a dial-up connection, but patience was a virtue I had learned over 65 years. The most crucial discoveries couldn't be rushed. Lori Steele business, I typed, feeling like an archaeologist uncovering ancient artifacts. The first results painted a portrait of polished success, professional headshots on LinkedIn, quotes about innovation and sustainability, mentions in entrepreneurship articles. She had learned to market herself well, too well, perhaps. Everything seemed rehearsed, almost staged, like a resume designed to cover gaps. I dug deeper, adding terms like startup and funding. The glossy facade began to crumble. By the third page of results, the first warning sign emerged. Green Tech Solutions under investigation for misappropriation of investor funds. My coffee had gone cold as I read. Green Tech Solutions, founded 2018. Solar panel startup. $500,000 raised from private investors. Company dissolved 2019 after the funds vanished and promised installations never happened. CEO, Lori Steele. The old printer wheezed as it coughed out the article, ink already running low. More cartridges would be needed if this investigation continued. Urban Fresh Markets. Lori Steele. Another startup. Another group of investors. $300,000 disappeared in 2021 after promises of organic food delivery services that never launched. Same pattern, bold promises, eager fundraising, then sudden disappearance. By noon, I had uncovered TechBridge Consulting, her most recent venture from 2022, business advisory services for small companies. $400,000 missing. Multiple complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau. 3 investors specifically named in an ongoing lawsuit. Alex Rivers, Sarah King, Mike Thorne. I wrote their names carefully in my notebook, my hand steadier than it had been in days. These weren't random business failures. They were deliberate thefts. My daughter hadn't merely abandoned her family, she had become a predator, feeding on others' ambitions and life savings. LinkedIn profiles supplied faces to the names. Alex Rivers, 50-year-old venture capitalist from San Francisco, his bio noting lessons learned from failed investments. Sarah King, corporate attorney from Chicago, emphasizing justice for victims of small business fraud. Mike Thorne, entrepreneur in Denver, post still simmering with anger over betrayal. The sun had long set by the time I tracked their contact information, business addresses, phone numbers, emails, all publicly accessible. Modern technology made locating people astonishingly simple, even for someone whose computer skills had been acquired late in life. At 2 a.m, I closed the laptop and stared at 3 manila folders spread across my desk. Each contained printed articles, contact info, and detailed timelines of my daughter's calculated deceit. The evidence was damning, overwhelming, heartbreakingly clear. I gathered the folders and walked slowly to my bedroom, my joints complaining after hours hunched over the screen. Instead of lying down, I perched on the bed's edge and reopened the first folder, studying Alex Rivers' photograph in the dim hallway light. These people deserved to know where their money had gone. Saturday arrived with steady rain tapping against the windows, perfect weather for plotting. Friday had been consumed with organizing research, verifying active phone numbers, and drafting letters by hand until the wording felt just right. Today, it was time to act. The computer glowed as I created a new email account, concern.citizen.detroit@gmail.com. Anonymous yet credible, the kind of address a whistleblower might use. My fingers moved deliberately across the keys, decades of hunt and peck typing finally paying off. The first email went to Alex Rivers in San Francisco. Dear Mr. Rivers, I have information regarding Lori Steele's current activities and whereabouts. She will be hosting a birthday party at 847 East 73rd Street, Apartment 12B, Manhattan, on April 7th at 8 p.m. This may be your opportunity to serve legal papers or recover funds owed. I understand you lost $200,000 in the TechBridge consulting matter. Other affected investors will likely find this information useful. Attached are copies of news articles documenting her pattern of behavior. A concerned party who believes in justice. I hovered over the mouse for exactly 3 seconds, the final moment to choose forgiveness over justice. Her voice echoed in my mind, why am I wasting my time with this? Click. Send. 30 minutes later, Sarah King received her carefully tailored email. Ms. King. As a fellow advocate for justice, I am informing you that Lori Steele will be at the following address on April 7th, 8 p.m., 847 East 73rd Street, Apartment 12B, Manhattan. Given your losses in the TechBridge consulting case, you may wish to coordinate with other investors. Documentation attached. Someone who believes criminals should face consequences. The third email, intended for Mike Thorne, demanded a different approach. His LinkedIn post painted a picture of someone who took business betrayals personally, who grasped the human toll of financial fraud. Mr. Thorne, Lori Steele shattered your trust and stole your money. She's doing the same to others, and trying to manipulate her aging father. She'll be celebrating her 40th birthday at 847 East 73rd Street, Apartment 12B, Manhattan, on April 7th at 8 p.m. Time to collect what she owes. A father exhausted by his daughter's deceit. Each email carried 20 years of accumulated disappointment, translated into precise coordinates for justice. I'd given them her exact location, the perfect timing, and documented proof of her repeated offenses. What they did with that information was their choice, but I had provided every tool they would need to confront the woman who had stolen their futures. Rain tapped steadily against the windows as I reviewed each message one last time. No threats, no calls to violence, just information shared between people who had been wronged by the same criminal. Legal, justified, and devastatingly effective. I closed the laptop and moved to the kitchen for lunch, checking my watch out of habit. 48 hours until Lori's party. 48 hours for 3 very angry investors to receive the emails and make their plans. The phone rang as I buttered a sandwich. An unknown number from San Francisco. I let it go to voicemail, smiling faintly as I listened to Alex Rivers' excited voice thanking an anonymous tipster for information that might finally bring resolution to a case that had consumed 2 years of his life. 10 minutes later, a second call came from Chicago. Sarah King's message carried the precision of her legal training, but beneath the professionalism was the sharp satisfaction of someone who had been waiting for exactly this break. By evening, I had confirmation that all 3 emails had been opened and read. Replies requested additional details, which I supplied meticulously: phone numbers, social media profiles, background on party attendees, everything necessary to coordinate their approach. 20 years of silence had ended with 3 emails and a few attached documents. My daughter had taught me that family meant little without money, that love was secondary to financial gain. Now she was about to learn what happened when that mindset met people who had nothing left to lose. I powered down the computer and moved to the living room, settling into Anne's chair with a cup of tea. 2 days until the party. 2 days until Lori discovered that actions, even those from 20 years ago, eventually demand repayment. Manhattan glittered around me like a jewel box as my taxi navigated the Upper East Side. 6 hours of highway driving from Detroit finally behind me. The modest hotel near Times Square had served its purpose, a place to shower, change clothes, and gather nerves for what was coming. Now, at 7:30 p.m. on April 7th, I carried a small wrapped box toward my daughter's apartment building, playing the role of proud father one last time. The doorman barely looked up as I gave her name, just another elderly relative arriving for a birthday celebration. The elevator carried me smoothly to the 12th floor, polished brass fixtures reflecting a man who appeared calmer than he felt. My watch read exactly 7:30. Perfect timing. "Daddy, you made it!" Lori's voice rang through the hallway as she opened the door, arms wide for a theatrical hug, rehearsed as everything else about our renewed relationship. Her apartment sparkled with expensive taste hiding quiet desperation. Crystal champagne flutes caught candlelight, while a jazz quartet played softly in the corner. 25 guests mingled in designer attire, their chatter drifting between stock markets and vacation plans. My eyes, however, found the details others missed: overdue bills stacked in the kitchen, worn spots on the Persian rugs, subtle signs of someone living beyond increasingly limited means. "Everyone, meet my father, the lottery millionaire," she announced, guiding me toward a circle of impressed faces. Guests circled like well-dressed sharks, interest sharpening as I smiled and nodded through introductions, playing the naive windfall recipient, while internally counting the minutes until 8 o'clock. "Tell us about your incredible win," a woman demanded, her jewelry likely costing more than my yearly pension. "Later, perhaps," I deflected. "Tonight belongs to Lori," I added, raising my champagne glass toward my daughter. "Such a devoted father," the woman gushed to her. "You're so fortunate to have family support." "Yes, he's been incredibly supportive lately," Lori replied, shooting me a meaningful look that said more than words ever could, a look that revealed her expectations for the evening ahead. I drifted through the party, taking in the carefully choreographed dance of social climbing and networking. These guests weren't here for Lori's birthday, they were here to rub elbows with wealth. Conversations followed a familiar rhythm. Compliments on her business savvy, leading questions about investment opportunities, subtle probes into my financial strategy. Lori conducted it all with practiced precision, gradually steering each discussion toward her need for strategic partners and capital. Each hint became more pronounced as the evening progressed, her desperation bleeding through the polished veneer like ink through fine stationery. "Daddy has been incredibly generous with his guidance," she told a small cluster near the window. "We're exploring some very exciting opportunities together." I glanced at my watch, 7:55. Any second now. Suddenly the apartment seemed smaller. Conversations felt louder, the jazz quartet's music unable to mask the tension only I could feel. Lori moved among her guests with growing energy, repeatedly introducing me as her accomplished father while slipping ever bolder hints about investment capital for her next venture. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched beneath us like a circuit board of ambition and greed. Somewhere in this city, 3 people I'd never met were making final preparations for a confrontation years in the making: Alex Rivers, Sarah King, and Mike Thorne, investors who had trusted my daughter with their dreams and watched her turn them into designer dresses and champagne-fueled evenings. The key to success, Lori was telling a captivated group, is spotting opportunity when it presents itself. Sometimes fortune literally calls you on the phone. Her eyes flicked to me, smile radiant, predatory. The woman who had abandoned me for 20 years now saw her father as the solution to all her financial problems. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. 7:58. I moved closer to the entrance, positioning myself to watch both the door and Lori's reaction when her past collided with her present. 8 o'clock arrived with the sharp chime of the doorbell slicing through the jazz and champagne-fueled chatter. Lori froze mid-sentence, champagne glass halfway to her lips. "I'll get it," she called cheerfully, but the faint furrow in her brow betrayed her. She hadn't expected extra guests. Heels clicking confidently on the marble floor, she moved toward the door. I took a slow sip of champagne, savoring the moment. 20 years of questions were about to be answered. 20 years of silence were about to explode into far more noise than either of us anticipated. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Lori shot a glance toward the entrance, irritation flickering across her carefully composed face. "Actually, Dad, since you're here," she said, turning to me with that practiced smile, abandoning her prior conversation mid-sentence. "I could really use your help with some exciting business ventures I've been developing." There it was, the moment I had been waiting for since stepping into her apartment. 20 years of silence, erased by the lure of lottery millions. I took another slow sip of champagne, relishing both the expensive taste and the impeccable timing. "Perfect timing, sweetheart," I said, setting my glass down with deliberate care. "What do you mean?" Her eyes brightened with anticipation, greed practically glowing beneath the flawless makeup. "I brought you a very special birthday gift," I said. "Something I think you've been waiting for." The doorbell rang again, sharper, more insistent. Lori glanced toward the entrance, annoyance flickering across her face, frustrated by the interruption of her carefully orchestrated pitch. "Really? What kind of gift?" She moved closer to me, lowering her voice to the intimate, coaxing tone she had perfected for extracting favors. "It's waiting right outside your door," I said, gesturing toward the entrance. "Outside? How thrilling!" For the first time all evening, her smile was genuine, anticipation replacing calculation. "You shouldn't have gone to so much trouble, Daddy." The term of endearment scraped against my ears like coarse sand, but I preserved the mask of paternal warmth. Around us, her guests continued their discussions of market trends and luxury getaways, oblivious to the reckoning about to descend on their hostess. Lori practically skipped toward the door, her heels clicking on the marble with the rhythm of someone expecting delightful news. I followed deliberately, positioning myself to watch both her expression and the reactions of the guests when reality finally intruded on their polished evening. "I can't imagine what you've arranged," she called over her shoulder, already reaching for the door handle. "You always were full of surprises." "Indeed," I replied, though perhaps not the kind she was anticipating. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and Lori Steele confronted her past. 3 figures stood in the hallway like a tribunal of reckoning. Alex Rivers, immaculate in a tailored business suit, held a leather briefcase promising damning documentation. Sarah King, face professionally neutral, carried a manila folder fat with evidence. Mike Thorne's jaw was tight, his expression barely containing years of anger and anticipation. "Lori Steele," Alex Rivers intoned, his voice crisp and commanding, the tone of someone used to high-stakes meetings and life-altering decisions. Her confident smile faltered. Recognition flared in her eyes, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. The champagne glass in her hand wobbled almost imperceptibly. "We need to speak," Sarah King added, her precise, measured tone leaving no room for debate. Conversations around us began to fade. Champagne glasses froze midair. Laughter stalled in throats. The jazz quartet played on, but the notes now sounded incongruously cheerful against the mounting tension at the doorway. I don't understand. Laurie stammered, eyes darting from one face to another, as if hoping each might transform into someone else entirely. Oh, but you do, Mike Thorne said, voice tight with 2 years of restrained fury. You understand perfectly. I watched my daughter's world unravel, a tangle of satisfaction and sorrow settling in my chest. Justice was being served, yet tinged with the grief of a father observing the consequences of actions he had helped orchestrate. The gift had arrived exactly as promised. These are legal documents concerning your fraudulent business practices, Sarah King announced, stepping fully into the apartment with professional authority. Her voice had the power to transform an elegant gathering into a courtroom. Laurie recoiled, her champagne glass slipping from trembling fingers to shatter against the marble. Crystal shards scattered like her meticulously crafted facade, glittering in the soft party lights. I don't know what you're talking about, she protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Recognition had already dawned in her eyes, the look of someone whose nightmares had materialized. Alex Rivers opened his briefcase with methodical precision, revealing a thick folder marked with tabs and official seals. Green Tech Solutions, Urban Fresh Markets, Tech Bridge Consulting. Each name landed like a hammer blow, exposing years of deception in 3 devastating phrases. You stole over $1 million from innocent investors, Mike Thorne added, his restraint finally cracking to reveal the raw, simmering anger beneath. People who trusted you with their life savings. Retirees who believed your promises about sustainable business and steady returns. The party atmosphere dissolved like sugar in rain. Guests edged closer, some pulling out phones to record the unfolding scandal, while others retreated toward the exits, unwilling to witness the collapse. Dad, who are these people? Laurie turned to me, eyes wide with desperation, seeking shelter in the paternal bond she had abandoned decades ago. I set my champagne glass down with deliberate care, meeting her gaze steadily. They're your past, sweetheart. Finally catching up. Understanding swept across her face like a cold wave. No makeup could hide the fear and shame as she absorbed the scale of what was happening. You did this. You brought them here. Happy birthday, Laurie. The words carried no malice, no celebration, only the quiet satisfaction of seeing balance restored to a skewed world. For 2 decades, I'd wondered if my daughter had a conscience. Tonight, the answer became painfully clear. You vindictive old man. She spat, her carefully maintained mask finally cracking. This isn't over. I'll sue you, for harassment, for stalking, for... Sarah King cut in, producing another document from her folder. For providing information about criminal activity to law enforcement. For assisting victims in recovering stolen property. The apartment thrummed with murmured reactions as guests digested the scene before them. Some discreetly filmed with their phones, while others gathered coats and handbags, strategizing an exit before the evening spiraled further out of control. Alex Rivers spread financial records across Laurie's coffee table, turning the elegant living room into a courtroom. Bank statements, fraudulent contracts, email trails, evidence of systematic theft, laid out among birthday decorations and half-filled champagne flutes. $1.2 million. He announced, voice carrying to every corner of the room. That's the verified total of losses from your ventures. This doesn't account for interest, damages, or the emotional distress caused to dozens of families. Criminal complaints have been filed with the FBI. Sarah King added, sliding official documents across the table. Federal wire fraud, securities violations, interstate transportation of stolen property. The charges are already in process. Mike Thorne leaned in, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You took my daughter's college fund. Money I saved for 15 years, working double shifts so she could have opportunities one never had. Laurie's eyes darted around, searching for allies among guests who had moments earlier been dazzled by my lottery fortune. But the crowd had recalibrated, social survival instincts overriding any fleeting admiration. "This is all fabricated," she cried, voice cracking on the words. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can," Alex Rivers said, holding up a smartphone displaying recorded conversations. "You kept meticulous records of your fraudulent schemes. Efficient businesswoman, tragically also a criminal." I watched my daughter's empire of deceit crumble in real time. There was no joy here, no sorrow, only inevitability. And had always said truth was like water, it finds its way through any barrier, no matter how tightly sealed. The jazz quartet had gone silent, their instruments unable to compete with the tension. Guests whispered among themselves before slipping quietly toward exits, leaving champagne glasses abandoned, a stark distance forming between them and the unfolding scandal. 20 years, I murmured, as much to myself as to the room. 20 years of wondering if you'd ever learn that actions carry consequences. Lori responded with threats and accusations, her words revealing more about her character than any legal file could. I, however, had finished my part in this drama. I turned toward the door, leaving 3 determined investors to begin reclaiming what she had stolen. The drive back to Detroit was 6 hours through gray April skies, mirroring my mood. Not celebratory, not regretful, closer to resolution. The radio reported arrests and investigations, though my daughter's case would take months to wind its way through federal courts. Justice is slow, but inexorable. That night, I stayed in a Times Square hotel, watching local news coverage of what reporters dubbed the birthday party bust. Lori's face appeared between traffic reports and weather updates, a fallen entrepreneur whose crimes had finally caught up to her. The focus on investor fraud rather than family drama suited me perfectly. By the time I reached Detroit, my next step was clear. Anne's grave sat under the old oak we had chosen together 40 years ago, when death felt like an abstract concept, reserved for other people. The headstone bore her name, the dates, and the words beloved wife and mother, the last now a bitter irony. "It's over," I said quietly, placing fresh flowers beside the weather-worn stone. She made her choice, just as she did 20 years ago. Actions have consequences. The cemetery stretched around us in tranquil silence, filled with families who had weathered poverty and illness, joy and sorrow, real families, unlike the fractured remnants Lori and I had become. "The money," I continued, touching the cold stone. "Let's use it the way you would have, to help families like ours used to be." 3 days later, I sat in the First National Bank conference room, signing papers to establish the In Green Memorial Fund. $2 million of lottery winnings were dedicated to helping Detroit families navigate medical crises and financial emergencies. The same impossible choices and then I had faced when deciding between rent and chemotherapy. The first recipients were a young couple whose son needed heart surgery, a grandmother raising 3 children while battling diabetes, and a veteran whose disability benefits fell short of covering medication and housing. Families confronting the same impossible dilemmas we had faced 15 years earlier. "Mr. Green," the bank president said as we finished the paperwork, "this is incredibly generous. Your wife would be proud. She would have been. And had always believed money should flow like water, nourishing where it touched, rather than being hoarded for display. Lori had seen wealth as a trophy. And had seen it as a lifeline. The community center where Anne had volunteered in her final years became the Foundation's headquarters. The same place where she had taught literacy classes and organized food drives now served as a hub for families seeking emergency aid. Her photograph hung in the main hallway, smiling at visitors who came for help, not handouts. "Mrs. Chin," I said to a single mother whose daughter needed insulin, "the Foundation will cover your medical expenses for the next 6 months. Focus on your family, not the bills. Mr. Rodriguez, your home will not be lost. The Foundation will cover your mortgage until your disability case is resolved. Mrs. Washington, your grandson's trade school tuition is fully paid. He can begin classes next month." Every check I signed carried Anne's memory forward, turning lottery fortune into real hope for families who had exhausted every other option. The money that might have fueled Laurie's next fraudulent scheme instead went to honest people facing genuine struggles. Evenings found me at the community center, teaching basic computer skills to job seekers and guiding families through the labyrinth of assistance programs. The work felt familiar, and I had been poor long enough to understand the obstacles that accompany financial hardship. 3 weeks after the birthday party that changed everything, my phone rang as I locked the center one April evening. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice was unmistakable. Mike Thorne. Mr. Green, I just wanted to thank you. The FBI recovered 40% of what she stole from us. Not everything, but enough to start over. I'm glad justice prevailed, I replied, walking toward my truck under the glow of streetlights in the neighborhood, and I had built our life in. She's going to prison, Mike continued. Federal guidelines suggest 5 to 7 years. Her assets are being liquidated for restitution. 5 to 7 years. Enough time for her to learn lessons that 39 years hadn't taught her. Or perhaps enough time to plot her next scheme, though a federal conviction would make fraud much more difficult. Mr. Green? There was curiosity in his voice. Why did you do it? Help strangers instead of family? I looked up at the faint stars above Detroit's urban haze, reflecting on loyalty and betrayal, justice and mercy, the intricate calculations of love and consequence. Sometimes strangers treat you better than family, I said. And sometimes family has to earn that title. The community center's lights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot, soon to be filled with families seeking help. Inside, Anne's photograph looked over the application forms and the hope they carried. Money, once an instrument of greed, had become a tool of grace. My daughter had shown me that wealth without love was meaningless. Now I was learning that love without boundaries carried the same emptiness. The lottery had given me money, but justice had restored my soul. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching.